Hi, I'm blonde. I don't know if you can really tell on camera. Sometimes it looks a little darker than it is, especially because it's really dirty. I dyed my hair blonde since the last time I filmed a video, and I really like it, so I hope you do too. Today, I thought it would be really fun to do this video like once a month where I basically just talked about all the books that I read in the month of blank. So for example, this video is going to be all of the books that I read in the month of January. One of my resolutions for this year was to get back into reading. I used to read all the time, and just with my schedule, I have not been able to keep up. Within the past couple of months though, I've been able to go through a ton of books, which I've been really grateful for. My goal for this year is to read at least one book a week. Which luckily has not been much of a challenge for me so far. And I'm really grateful for that. So basically in this video, I'm just going to show you all the books I read in January of 2022 and my thoughts and reviews on them. So without further ado, let's hop right into it. I read a total of 5 books in January of 2022, and I'm pretty proud of myself for that. All of these books are bigger books. All of these books are bigger books minus one, which is kind of a smaller one, but they all are pretty heavy topics and pretty different styles of writing, not necessarily genres, but just like different author styles. And so it took me a little bit to get used to each book. Starting with the first book of the year, which was a book that I got for Christmas from my sister. It is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So this book is highly loved. It is in most people's like book of the year list for 2021. And in fact, it was book of the month's book of the year for 2021. So it is highly loved. I've never read a book by Taylor Jenkins Reid before, but I've heard nothing but good things. And this is probably her most popular or most like well-loved. So I really did enjoy it. I will say I didn't necessarily love it as much as I liked it. I did read this after I read one of my absolute favorite books of all time, and so that made it a little harder for me to really love it because I was still thinking about that book. I will also say I took a break from this book to read the second book of the year because I think the story, it just took a little bit to get going. I'm a huge mystery thriller person, and so this book, not necessarily being a mystery and not necessarily being a thriller, fell right between those lines where I kept waiting to be grabbed onto, and I just never really felt that like grabbed, you know what I mean? It took me a little bit to get into this book, probably the first 150 pages or so. I even tempted thinking about putting it down. But once I got to about the middle of the book, the story really started to pick up and I started to fall in love with the characters. I think if I was to say like one issue that I had with the book, and I know that this is the reason that a lot of people love this book, is it didn't really feel like there was a main character. It didn't really feel like there was one person that I was rooting for or was like the central plot of the book. There felt like there was 9 or 10 characters and a lot of changing storylines, and it just took me a little bit to get invested in it. It didn't feel like there was one plot point. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being, oh my gosh, this is literally a perfect book, the best book I've ever read, and 1 being, I would never recommend this, and if you like this book, you're crazy, I would give this book a solid 6.9 out of 10. And again, take this into consideration, I literally finished one of my favorite books of all time before reading this. That definitely changes some things. So overall, Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, I gave a 6.9 out of 10, which is not a bad score. So I would recommend buying this if you're a fan of books where there's not necessarily one plot and you want to be able to digest each and every person's storyline. I would recommend this then. But if you're a huge mystery or thriller lover, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this. It doesn't really fall into either of those categories. So that's Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, the first book that I read in 2022. The second book I read in 2022 is actually the one that I took a break from reading Malibu Rising to read, which is It Ends With Us by Colleen? I believe it's Colleen Hoover. This book is another one that is loved. If you're ever on like Book Talk or Bookstagram, it is everyone's favorite book. Everyone loves this book, and I decided to pick it up because I had so many things on my For You page saying that I should read it, and so I decided to, and I can happily say this is probably in my top 15 of my favorite books I've ever read, or most transformative. I absolutely love this book with everything that I have. And I think that she is a phenomenal author. This is the only book I've read by her, but I have intended to purchase many more. She absolutely just grabs you from the first 2 or 3 chapters while still giving you a little bit of wiggle room where it doesn't feel like you go in and get smacked with this huge thing. There are several chapters before it leads to some of the harsher topics of the book. I will say though, if you have any triggers when it comes to domestic violence or necessarily just like violence in general, this may not be a great book for you to read. It does have some pretty triggering words and pretty triggering scenes. overall, a phenomenal book. I absolutely loved the characters. I loved how you still had a soft spot for each character, even if they weren't necessarily a good person. Again, I am a huge mystery thriller person. This book is not a mystery or a thriller book, but I still absolutely loved it because it latched you on like a mystery or a thriller does, and you rode this wave with the main character and her love for this person who was not right for her. And it kept you guessing until the very end, like a mystery or a thriller would, but you still loved the characters like you would in a romance. If you're a fan of like mystery, thriller, drama, romance books, you're going to love this. It's incredible and it will wreck you, and be prepared to cry. And if you're looking for a book to read in like a night, just to binge read a book, this would be the book. I think I read this in like 2 days and I absolutely loved it. So overall, I would give It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover a 8.2 out of 10. There were definitely some parts of it that I necessarily like, I wanted the characters to do this thing, or I wanted them to do this. But I would give this book an 8.2 out of 10. Almost perfection. The third book that I read in January of 2022 is a much smaller book. I read Normal People by Sally Rooney, and this book is another one that people love. It's a pretty small book, so it was an easy read, but I didn't love the style of writing. There's no quotations in here, which is obviously symbolism. Once you read the book, it is very clearly symbolism for the characters. However, I just felt like at the end of the book, I knew how it was going to end about 20 pages in. And I felt like there was just this back and forth and there was no real like, what's going to happen? I would recommend reading this book if you're a fan of dramatic romances or just romances in general, because it has a lot of those themes that aren't necessarily my favorite. I don't regret reading this book. I probably would not recommend it, and I don't think I would read it again. I would give this book about a 5.8 out of 10. And I know that's a really harsh score, but it just wasn't for me. Book number 4 I read in January of 2022 is The Final Girl Support Group by Gary Hendricks. I got this book at a bookstore with my boyfriend because he is a huge fan of horror movies and not a big reader, and so I thought it'd be really fun to kind of read this book and talk about it together. I did not realize how many references there were going to be to very common and very well-known and very well-loved horror movies. There's references to Scream and Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre and all of these ones that I didn't even know existed. Did you know there's a Frosty the Snowman horror movie? Did not know that, learned that. I would say this was another book that I felt took a little while to take off, probably the first 100 pages or so. I wasn't as enthralled with the story as I was kind of hoping to be, and then those last 300 pages, oh my goodness, I was absolutely enthralled in the story. I was literally looking over at my boyfriend like every 5 minutes and being like, this just happened. And I absolutely loved this book. If you're a fan of thrillers or horror movies in and out of itself, I think you would absolutely love this book. The imagery that Grady Hendricks, the imagery that Grady Hendricks uses in the book is phenomenal if you're a fan of horror movies, thrillers, mysteries, things like that. I would say this fits more in the realm of a thriller than it does in a mystery, but this book is absolutely incredible. I loved it. I would recommend it to basically anybody. However, if you're not a fan of horror movies or if you don't know a lot about them, you're gonna miss a lot of the really important symbolism and references they make in this book. But overall, I absolutely love this book and would definitely recommend it. I would give this book a score of a 7.8. I think I liked the references it made and how much fun me and my boyfriend could have talking about it more than I did the actual book itself. And I didn't like that the first 100 pages took a pretty long time for me to be invested in. But overall, I absolutely love this book and I would recommend it. Speaking of said boyfriend, he needs picked up in like 5 minutes. So I gotta wrap this up, which is good because we're on the last book of January 2022, which was A Flicker in the Dark. This was my December book of the month, but I did not read it until January. And oh my goodness, did I love this book. This is A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. I believe this is her first novel, and I loved it. I would say this fits more into the mystery / thriller side of books than just mystery or just thriller. It kept me wanting more, and the plot twist at the end was just crazy, and it was another one of those books where I kept looking over at my boyfriend every 5 minutes and being like, did you hear that? I would definitely recommend this book if you're a fan of mysteries and thrillers. If you're not a fan of specifically those genres, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this. It doesn't fit into any of the other types of genres that people tend to like romances or historicals or anything like that. It's definitely a mystery or thriller, and it's written for mystery thriller fans, and that is fine because I am those fans. However, I will say this book fell into the same trap that I've had with a couple of different books this month, which was I didn't really feel invested in it until probably about 50 or 75 pages in. Not nearly as bad as like 100 or 150, but 50 to 75 pages is still a bit much for a mystery or a thriller to kind of grab you. But once this book grabs you, it does not let go until the final page. And honestly, I think at the end of the book, I really appreciated the fact that it took so long to grab me, because I feel like otherwise I might have gotten bored with it or overwhelmed. I would give this book an 8.4 out of 10. And those were the books that I read in January of 2022. I'm already lots of books into February 2022. So let me know if you have any recommendations based off of what I thought of these books in the comments. Let me know what you thought of these books in the comments, because I would love to have a conversation with you about them. And if you read any of these books, please let me know any that you know are similar that I could read and possibly like. With that, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this type of video, let me know by giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing down below and hitting the little notification bell so you never miss another video. And with that, I need to go pick up my boyfriend and continue to read The Love Hypothesis and talk to him about it every 5 minutes. So, love you guys so much. I will see you in the next video. Bye.